My name is David Madison, the 1st of May 2020. I'm an ex-clergy atheist, and I have collected more than 380 book titles into what I call the Cure for Christianity library, in homage to Mark Twain's famous comment that the best cure for Christianity is reading the Bible. Now we have a lot more books to help with that, and these books explain in detail the falsification of theism, Christianity especially. Please tell your Christian friends they have a lot of homework to do. They haven't noticed. Just type Cure for Christianity Library into Google. These authors have stated some very blunt truths. Hence this series of videos, Cure for Christianity Knockout Quotes. This is number 22. In his novel, A Brief Eternity, Paul Beaumont wrote this, one of his characters reflecting. Quote, "The idea that a person's eternal destiny could depend upon something as fragile, as accidental as their religious beliefs, most of which were simply inherited from parents, seems so ludicrous that only the most gullible and naive could possibly entertain it." Unquote. To a large degree, religious beliefs are accidental. Which country were you born in? In the U.S., most folks are Christians, and there are so many varieties of that. In other countries, you would have been raised Muslim or Hindu. In Utah, probably Mormon. People tend to believe what their parents teach them to believe. And Christians are pretty darn sure that belief in Jesus is the one and only ticket to get to heaven. The Apostle Paul put it bluntly in Romans 10, verse 9, "If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Christian missionaries have covered the globe to rescue people, bring them to Jesus before it's too late. How could God have set up such a scheme or even approved it? It's just a fact that most of the people who have ever lived have not believed in their hearts that God raised Jesus from the dead. So God just writes them off? Sorry, you're out of luck? Paul was so convinced about this because of his hallucinations. The gospel accounts are not reliable, verifiable evidence for the resurrection. Far from it. Why believe it? So Christians would do well to dwell on this. God welcomes Jesus believers, but sends to everlasting torture all those who don't believe. God's love takes a big hit if this is true. Would God be more concerned about what's going on inside our heads rather than how we're treating other people? This is so contrary to common sense and decency. We all have the image in our minds of St. Peter at the gate of heaven with his big ledger book, a page for each one of us, a tabulation of our good deeds and bad deeds. That's how he decides on who gets in. In our gut, this feels right. And then there's the famous story of Jesus telling a man point blank what to do to inherit eternal life. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Wasn't the person who wrote that story on the right track? So the New Testament couldn't get its act together. Let's review part of Beaumont's knockout quote again, because he calls it correctly. Belief in Jesus as the only key to heaven seems so ludicrous that only the most gullible and naive could possibly entertain it. Sad to say, a lot of Christians seem to be going for the championship in gullible and naive.